We've got to
mm,
feel our upset. We've got to feel our anger. We've got to
mm,
feel our hurt, but
mm.
it's ours. It's
Yeah.
ours to process. The work isn't ringing up your parents and saying, you never listened to my feelings and why didn't you play with me more and all that kind of stuff. That's actually not going to really help.
Hi there, and a warm welcome to the Habit Nerd podcast. I'm Dr. Bree Hearn, host and general nerd about all things habits. Over my 20 plus years working as a writer, educator, researcher, keynote speaker, and coach, I've realized that habits influence everything from our health to our productivity and even our relationships. It was Aristotle, in fact, who said we become what we repeatedly do. On this podcast, you'll learn from inspiring experts as they share the habits and systems that help them live happily, healthily, and to achieve enormous success in their chosen fields. Thanks for being here. I do hope that you enjoy the episode. Hi there, Habit Nerds. Today on the podcast, it is my great joy and excitement to be joined by Lael Stone. Now, Lael is an Australian speaker, educator, and an author who's all about connection and compassion. Lael has spent years helping parents really understand their kids, supporting adults to make sense of their own childhood experiences, and rethinking education so emotional awareness is just as important as the academic side. Her mission is pretty simple: to help people know themselves better and to feel inspired to create the life that they truly want. So today we are centering our conversation around Lael's really impactful and amazing new book that is titled Own Your Story. So Lael, thank you for being here and welcome to the Habit Nerd podcast.
I'm really happy to be here, Bree. Thanks for having me.
All right, Lael, let's jump into our standard question that I use with all of my guests. What is a habit that you have that you're proud of because it makes you feel most like yourself?
Yeah, that's such a great question. To me, it's like an internal question, actually, and I do it every morning when I wake up. I know it's going to sound a little bit out there, but I'll just go with it. I literally put my hand on my heart
Mm,
and I say the words, remember who you are. And what I mean by that is really around just remember your essence, which is, you want to be kind and compassionate and you're here to try and make a difference in the world. I think it's so easy for us to lose ourselves in our center. And that statement for me, remember who you are, is really, I don't know, it's an invitation to come back to my center. I think, and
mm,
try and operate throughout the day from that place of loving kindness and compassion. So it's something I started many years ago when I was kind of really struggling with where am I meant to be in this world, and the harsh inner talk, the critic that we have within. And I think it was just an act of self-kindness and compassion to just
mm,
remind myself, like, remember the essence of who you are, and
mm,
that's how we want to move through the day. So that's how I start my day every morning. I
mm.
just kind of remember who you are, and then usually I have another statement after that, which is I usually kind of just put it out there of like, show me where you need me. And what I mean by that
Mm,
is, where do I get to be of service in this world? Because it
mm,
often is when we are being of service and helping others, we step more away from our ego and what it should look like. So those two questions have become really beautiful habits for me. Like, remember who you are and then kind of show me where you need me. And what that does for me is it kind of keeps my eyes open to opportunities in the world, or where I can be of service, or where I can help, and that feels a good thing.
Oh, I love it for so many reasons. Do you feel like you come back to the question throughout the day, or is the one as soon as you wake in the morning with your hand on your heart as sort of that physical cue enough to guide you?
Yeah, I think the intention's always good. I'm a big fan of intention. So I think
Mm,
starting the day with intention is good.
mm,
If we wake up and we go, oh God, what have I got to do today? And this is going to be
mm,
hard. And, I think our brain's like, oh yeah, let's lock into how challenging this is. So I think there is that beautiful thing of setting an intention for the day. But I do come back to it at times, especially when I have decisions to make or if I want to
mm,
say yes to something. I do often tune in to be
mm,
like, does this feel really in alignment with me? Is this a yes for me?
mm,
Where do I want to sit with that? So it does pop up at certain
mm,
times, not
mm,
not every day, but there are definitely times where I come back to that centerpiece and just go, what does feel really in alignment for me?
And another reason I love it is because, and I talk, as an educator about this a lot, but Nobody has your magic. Like
Mm,
nobody is exactly you.
mm,
So to remember who you are
yeah.
is to be the person who is the best at the intersection of all of the
Mm,
things that you can bring to the world,
yeah.
as opposed to what do I need to do today? What's on
Yeah.
my to-do list?
Yeah.
And I love that second follow-up question. It reminds me of another one that I've heard, and you've reminded me, so I will try and embed it back into my practice with more intentionality. But the question is to close my eyes and say, what would you have me do? So it's
Yeah.
almost like when I feel like I'm being pulled in multiple
Yeah.
directions, and it's just, what would you have me do? I don't even know who you is,
Yeah.
but it's like
Yes.
God, source, universe,
Yeah.
but just basically where
Yeah.
where is my energy, where is my kind of essence best spent in this moment? And I
Yeah.
need some guidance with that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, oh, what a lovely habit. It's
Mm.
an original one. We haven't had that one yet. So thank you, Lael, for sharing that. Now, you have worked with families and individuals for such a long time, over 20 years. What led you, though, to turn into an author and write this wonderful book, Own Your Story, at this point?
Yeah. I think I don't know. I feel like it's such a privilege to work with humans, right? And I have always, as I look back now, and even the title of my book, Own Your Story, which in a lot of it is about understanding our own story and who we are. I realize even in writing that book that ever since I was little, I have been so curious about people. I wanted to know where they came from and how many siblings they have and what it's like in their family. And even as a teenager, I was super curious about what made people tick and why do you do this? And I had such a
Mm,
deep yearning to know myself deeply as well. So I think that has always been there, that thread of wanting to understand people more.
mm,
And really, I guess this book came about because having worked with families for over 20 years, I kept seeing the same themes and patterns turn up again and again and again, particularly in the parenting space. So, a lot of parents would often come to me because, their kids wouldn't get in the bath or they were having meltdowns or their siblings were fighting. And you've got all the tools that you can work with to, try this thing and listen and use some play and all the practical stuff we talk about. But I began to see that no matter how many tools I kept giving parents, if their imprints or their stories from their own childhood were deeply embedded in suppression or getting angry or not dealing with things or that feelings weren't safe, then it kind of didn't matter how many tools I gave them because
mm,
until the adults really looked at their own imprints in their own
mm,
stories, nothing was
mm,
often going to change.
mm,
So I saw it really clearly with a lot of parents I work with, and other philosophies or ways of thinking can often, point towards this, whether it's a blueprint we have or whether it's
mm,
just the attachment stories we grow up with, or all those kind of things. So there's many different ways we can come to this point. But I think what I really began to just acknowledge and see is that the same themes kept turning up, and it wasn't just in parenting, it was in regards to every aspect of our lives. So
mm,
not just the way we respond to children, but how we are in intimate relationships, our work ethic, what we feel about success, what's our relationship to money, to food, to everything. We have imprints and stories that we have around everything because we were all raised in these individual family units, and every family unit had a different story that they told. So what I found really fascinating was, what is that imprint in that story and how does it impact you? Are you doing what was done to you, often unconsciously,
mm,
or are you really consciously trying to swing in the other direction to make sure you
mm,
don't do that and
mm,
sometimes overshoot so that you don't
mm,
actually find the balance?
mm,
A lot of the imprints and stories that we have are often unconscious, and we often try
mm,
and stay loyal to them even though we don't like them, just
mm.
because it means that we belong in our family. So there's some really interesting little threads in there. And I think that after seeing those patterns for a really long time, and working with families for a long time, I ran these courses for ages, which were helping people understand their stories and imprints more. Then I got approached actually by some publishers saying, do you want to turn this into a book and
Mm,
see where it goes from there? So, yeah, it's been a really beautiful journey to take this lived work where I've just witnessed and worked with thousands of adults to then see it come to a book form and hopefully get others thinking about, their stories and where they come
mm.
from.
Yeah. And I want to congratulate you on that because it is really one for the masses, but the credibility that comes from the real stories from your 20 years worth of distilling those patterns down is really evident in the book. It's sort of And it's exactly what you say. We can have all the tools, or we can call on research or evidence about what should work in the moment, but we are who we are, and we do get pulled back to center, don't we? And I really think it's a generous way to look at it, that there's a, particularly if you were lucky enough to grow up in a family where, that was a mostly positive experience, there can be interesting feelings of a lack of loyalty, or, almost my parents did the best they could. Sometimes there was things that now I see showing up in myself as a parent that aren't particularly helpful, and I need to interrogate that now. And sometimes it can be a bit uncomfortable because I love my parents deeply,
Yes.
so it's really complex work, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's I love that you brought that up because it is a theme that I see a lot of. There's a beautiful documentary that I was part of this year called
Mm,
Seen,
mm-hmm,
SEEN, and it really does talk about the way we were raised and how that impacts how we raise our children. And one of
mm,
the things that I talk about in the film is that we can love our parents deeply,
mm,
deeply, and feel so
mm,
grateful for the way we were raised, and also have a lot of feelings around some of the things that they did. And
mm,
I guess over time, what I've really witnessed is each generation we comes through, we're meant to question. We're meant to often look
mm,
back and go, did that work? Did that not? And at the same
mm,
time, hold a lens of compassion for our parents, our grandparents, our great grandparents. They were doing the best they could with the tools they had.
mm,
Yet, what I think is really interesting at this point where we are right now is we have a group of adults who have resources, support, information, knowledge, science, all these beautiful things to help us understand ourselves better.
mm,
And I often say that this group of parents at the moment are some of the most courageous parents I think that exist, because they're actually willing to turn towards their past and say,
mm,
that's what happened. That didn't feel good. And what do I need to heal within me to do it differently for the future
mm,
generations coming?
mm.
It takes a lot of courage to actually
Yeah.
do that. But I really do feel that we are at this point in time where it is being asked of us, because we
Mm,
do have the support and the resources and the information there. Whereas our parents never had that. Of
that's
course, they didn't
right.
have the internet. Our grandparents didn't have that. They were
Mm,
just getting on and doing what they were doing. And so I
mm,
think, one of the big things that I hope is conveyed in my book is there is no blame, and there is
mm,
no our parents were wrong. They were just doing what they were shown and what
mm,
they would, were told was appropriate at the time.
mm,
And I think the trickiness is being able to be aware of that, understand the story, heal any feelings within us that we may
mm,
carry around that
mm,
without projecting or blame.
mm,
We've got to
mm,
feel our upset, we've got to feel our anger, we've got to
mm,
feel our hurt,
mm.
but it's ours. It's
Yeah.
ours to process. The work isn't ringing up your parents and saying, you never listened to my feelings and why didn't you play with me more and all that kind of stuff. That's actually not going to really help. It's
Mm,
probably just going to put your parents into defense, and then there's arguments, and then we create another narrative that says, see, you don't see me, and you don't love me the way I need to, and then we become a victim of that story. The work is being able to identify, these are my reactions and my feelings around that, and what do I need to do my own healing work
mm,
within that, so I get to integrate it, so that if I am a parent, how do I move forward without carrying those same patterns?
mm. And a beautiful connection to the title of your book, as in owning your story. So
Yeah.
that's, the self-responsibility there, and the accountability to gently do things, in slightly different ways because of the feelings that
Yeah.
you're, paying attention to. So yeah, thank you for articulating it. This is all so interesting. Now, the theme of imprints is really prominent throughout your book.
Mhm.
And you said at the beginning that we can come to this sort of similar idea in different ways. I recognize like schema therapy here.
Mm. Mhm.
um, this is a two-part question,
Mhm.
so could you help the listeners understand what an imprint is and how it
Mhm.
might show up in our adult lives? And then the second part of the question is, was there a personal moment or experience that you had, Lael, where you realized the power of these childhood imprints in
Mm.
your own life,
Yeah.
your own experience?
Yeah. So the way I describe an imprint, and again, I'm all about, take what resonates, throw out what doesn't. This has just been the what's made a lot of sense to me in my world, and I think all the parents I've had the privilege to work with is, for me, I see an imprint as a belief system or a story that we take on board as children and we believe to be true.
Mhm.
And so we have lots of wonderful positive imprints. If you grew up in a family where your family really valued the outdoors and nature and taking care of the earth, and that would probably be an imprint that is really strong within you, where you have a great desire to be outside or take care of the planet, or it's something that's usually innate within you because that was modeled to you. If your parents were people that loved sharing meals together, inviting people over, and food was a celebration, that has probably become an imprint within you, where it's something that you carry forward, where food is a really wonderful thing. It's a time of connection, getting together and all that kind of stuff. Perhaps your parents really modeled working hard to achieve something, and that was imprinted within you of like, yeah, I'm not afraid to work hard and achieve something. I mean, that can be a double-edged sword because sometimes it's at the cost of ourselves, so you have to be careful
Overwork.
about that one.
Yes, yes.
But, the imprint may be, hey, have courage, give it a go, take a risk, all those kind of things. So we have lots of beautiful positive imprints that we have in our stories, in our families of origin. And then we have a lot of imprints that don't serve us. So it may be that when something was uncomfortable in the family or something needed to be addressed that nobody wanted to, so they just turned the other way or they just pushed it on the rug. And the narrative and the imprint in the family was, we just don't deal with feelings. We just don't talk about it. We pretend that it goes away. Or the opposite is, we just yell a lot at each other, and love equals yelling. So we grow up in a family that we believe if you love someone, then you yell at them, and then maybe you grow up and you find a partner and, you get upset about something, you start yelling and your partner's not yelling back. And then you make it mean that they must not love you because they don't yell you, like these are all the things, the stories that we make up in our head. So we have amazing imprints. We have imprints we also may want to change. And I think where I find the interesting piece is, it's often when we are bumping up against the same issues in our lives, whether that's in relationship, whether it's with work, whether it's parenting, whether it's our self-worth, then that is where I think the invitation is to inquire, well, what is my story here? What are the imprints I received around this? So even as a basic example, even when working with a lot of parents and we talk about children being angry and upset and crying, and one of the imprints I ask is, okay, well, what was modeled to you in your family when you were a little kid and you got angry, you got upset, you made a mistake? How did your parents or the adults in your world respond? And a lot of the time the answer is, well, I got sent to my room, I got shut down, maybe I got smacked, maybe I got told that I'll give you something to cry about. And the imprint becomes feelings are not okay. So then that is lodged and imprinted in our body. And then when we become a parent and when our child gets angry and gets upset, well, that imprint kind of surfaces of like, feelings are not okay. And so what we want to do is we get angry, we want to shut it down, we want to turn away from it because there's nothing in our system that says this is actually okay. Now we can understand the knowledge and the theory, and sometimes that's enough to hold us. But a lot of the time what surfaces in our body is this fear response that says this is not all right. And so we have these imprints on everything. And again, I think the invitation is to look at what are they with curiosity? Do they serve me? Do they not? So for me, I think I really came to this probably the first two that really stopped me in my tracks around realizing the imprints I had. The first one was absolutely around self-care when I became a mum. So when, I became a mum at 25, none of my friends really had kids. I was like, yeah, the beautiful ignorance of a 25-year-old who thinks they know everything. That slowly kind of started to crumble when I was just drowning, because I didn't think that, my imprint was really around, as a mother and a woman, you should just be able to do everything.
And
So
be
I
all
come
knowing.
from I come from a family of really amazing, strong women, like beautiful role models. But the narrative I took on board, or the imprint, was if you're not doing three things at once, you're lazy. So then when you're a mum, and I was running a business at the same time, and I had a toddler, and I had no self-care and no imprint around that that's a good thing. And then I just started to become angry and resentful, and I didn't know how to ask for help. And the only way I figured I could actually get a break was to get sick. So if I get sick, then I'll have a break. And really, as I began to see these patterns, which really became messy in my relationship with my husband, I found mothering really hard. I felt really resentful a lot of the time. When we began to kind of drill down to what it was really about this story I had around, I don't deserve to have a break. And
Mm.
so then I had to trace, well, where does this story come from? And so then I could acknowledge it came from my mum and my aunt and my grandmother and the women in our family. It says you just keep going and you just keep giving. Now I know a lot of women relate to this because I've
Mm.
spoken to so many about it, that their mother figure or the woman in their life was a martyr. And that's what
Mm.
you do, and being a good mother means you do everything for everybody and you put your needs last.
Mm.
But that actually doesn't work in our modern age at all, because we know this. We know that when we don't take care of our needs, we're pretty much no good to anyone. And what happens is when we are not allowing that self care in and we're not giving ourselves what we need to fill up our own cup, we become angry, we become
Mm.
resentful, we
Mm.
become actually people we don't want to be.
Mm.
So the self care one was the first one where I just was like, whoa, it
Yeah.
felt so hard for me to have self care. Every single part of my body was like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do
Fighting
it.
it. Mm.
Yeah, because the imprint was really like, well, no, if you do that, you're lazy. And I'm like, I don't want to be lazy. And so, therefore, my story was, I can't do it. So I had to really look at, how do I change this story? What do I want it to be? And I think it really shifted for me when I actually had my second child, which was a daughter. And it really dawned on me that who she's going to base herself
Mm.
on the world, in the world, is on me, right?
Mm.
I am the female imprint for her. And
Mm-hmm.
so what do I want her relationship to self-care to be? And I realized that kids can't be what they can't see. So
Mm.
even though I could be saying to her, you need to take all the care, if I'm not modeling how to do that, then that's only going to go so far. So that was really, for me, the impetus to change, was to be really around, okay, what do I want for my kids here? What
Mm.
is the imprints I want them to carry forward?
Mm.
And then start to take steps to change it and to understand it.
Mm.
So the self-care one was a huge one. And then the
Mm.
second one that really stopped me in my tracks was actually around money. And that is
Okay.
one of the biggest imprints that I work with a
Mm.
lot of people around these days,
Mm-hmm.
is the imprints we have around money are so fascinating.
Mm. I
And
agree.
again, love my parents. They're amazing. I've got the most divine relationship with them. But what they brought to the table with their imprints around money was, and what I learned as a kid growing up was this: you must work really, really, really hard just to have enough. That was
Mm.
it. And then the imprint I also had from my father was people with money, not very nice people, right?
Greedy or
Yeah,
yes.
they're arrogant, they're assholes, they're whatever. So, we
Yes.
can't, we don't want to be that. So that were the
Mm.
messages I had taken on board. So again, I grow up with this story of, well, in order to earn money, I have to work really, really, really hard just
Mm.
to have enough. But then we don't want to have too much because we don't want to be seen as being
Showy and
arrogant, or yeah,
arrogant and yeah.
and
Or
my
not
loyalty.
trustworthy.
Yeah.
Mm.
And my loyalty, often unconsciously, was to belonging to my family.
Of
Like, it was like a
course.
loyalty to my dad. I won't be like that, dad. Like,
Yes,
I
yes.
want you to approve of me. So there was a lot of messiness around money, and therefore I kept sabotaging myself, kept like not making much. Like, it was really crazy. And so
Or
that took a
spending probably to send it out again.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then, of course, often what happens is you maybe get together with a partner and they bring their own imprint of money, and my husband's imprint of money was equally as crazy.
Mm.
And so together we were struggling, and as
Mm.
a young family, money was a point of big contention, in
Tension.
our relationship.
Mm.
And so that was again where I realized I really need to change this story, not only for my children, but for us. I
Mm.
really need to reframe what I want this imprint to be, because
Mm.
I don't want to carry an imprint forward that says you must work so, so hard just to have enough. No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to kill myself just to have
Mm.
enough.
Mm.
And I also needed to reframe that actually having money is not a bad thing.
No.
Giving me money or having money means I can do a lot of beautiful things in the world. It
Mm.
means I
Can
can
be of
give to my
service in bigger
kind.
ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It means I can give things away. It means I can have more space to be with my children in the way I want to. So I really had to do a really big reframe around what that looked like and really shift that imprint. And they were probably the two that really landed with me. Of once I began to see the evidence of changing that story, I was like, oh, we can change this on everything, because it's just a story. It's a story we tell ourselves. It's a belief system we take on board. And often the roots of it are in the loyalties to our families and those places of belonging.
Mm. They both hit so deep in my soul. I can't even tell you. I would imagine, particularly the self-care one, would, as you've already identified with lots of people that you've worked with, would be absolutely rife in the community of women in particular.
Yeah.
And the money one, there's no question. I hadn't prepared this question for you, but I'm hoping you'll be okay to answer it. You've just told me those two imprints, which I absolutely identify with, but I don't feel like I'm there yet in owning that story. And is it reasonable to expect of ourselves that we can keep coming back and chipping away at doing the work on these stories, and that it's not a one and done.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, absolutely. Because the threads run deep. Like it's a
yeah,
beautiful
very
thing you're bringing, Brie, because if you've had 30 or 40 or 50 years on this planet, like, and that's the message you've got, it would be so beautiful if we just go, I understand it now, and then we change. But we don't, because those threads run pretty deep within us. And
they're
so
like
we
tree
often
roots, aren't they? Very,
they
very deep.
are, yeah. And so the first step is often, okay, for me, I look at it as a process. The first step is identifying, yeah, that's the narrative I've taken on board. That's the story. That's the loyalty. That's the imprint. That's the belief system. So the first thing is acknowledging it. Yes, of course I do that, because that's where it comes from. So once we acknowledge it and not make it wrong, we're just like, yeah, that's what it is. And then what we want to do, the next step is we want to look at, well, what do I want it to look like? Like, what would I want it to be? What do I want my relationship to self-care to be? I want to have such a healthy relationship with self-care that when I'm realizing I'm stretched, I'm like, I need a break. It feels great to take a break. I'm deeply supported in taking a break. Everybody's needs can be met. It is healthy for me to do it. So that's maybe the next imprint that we want to have. And then we often have to look for evidence that it's safe enough for us to do that. So we try it for the first time. We might say to our partner, I'm going for a walk tonight for 2 hours. You need to deal with the kids, or I'm going to take a weekend off, or whatever it looks like. And I know it's not always as easy and clean as that, but we actually take a step towards it. And then we have to look for evidence that it is safe for us to do
But
it.
everything was
So
okay.
yeah, we then go for a walk for a few hours. We come back, and even though the kids might not be happy, they're still alive. They're still fine.
Nobody died.
No,
Yeah.
we're all okay. There is some evidence it is safe for me to do this. And then we actually tune in with ourselves. I actually have more patience because I've actually had a break. So we begin to look for the evidence of why this is actually a very, very good thing. But it does take practice. And there's also these really sneaky little thoughts that we have in there. So we can get the big one, then the next one comes up, and the next one. And it is a work in progress.
Okay, good.
I'm such a work in progress. So let me tell you the story of when I think I wrote about this in the book, when I first began to see I need to change my story around self-care. So what I did is I was like, okay, I need some help. So I rang my mother-in-law and said to her, can you come and take my youngest? And she's like, yeah. And her question to me was, do you have to go to work? And I didn't feel like I could say no. So I was like, yeah, I have to go to work. So I pretended I went to work in order to still feel okay, because I thought I was going to be judged. So that was the first step. I pretended to go to work. She looked after my daughter. I went home, went to sleep, and then went and picked her up again. And I did it 2 or 3 times, which is kind of funny now, because I felt like that was the only way I could work towards going, I can have a break and own it. And then after the 3rd time, I was like, this is crazy. And I said, no, I'm actually going to have a break. And she was a bit judgy about it, because in her generation, you don't do that. And I was like, I'm a better mum when I have a break. And she's like, oh, okay, well, I kind of get that. And then the more I actually started to own it, the less she questioned it. And then the more I just claimed that space. So I
This
had
is
to
what I
kind
do
of
now.
work my way up to doing it. And I think we can all do that in different ways. And I think it is a beautiful work in progress. It really is. With most of our imprints, they are going to pop up and test us. And then we've got to keep working towards, what do I want this to look like?
So it's almost an invitation to keep asking that question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think also the other important thing to say there is that the judgment that you felt from your mother-in-law, I would continue to probably feel that from my own mum, with the most love in the world, because like your mum, highly effective, highly capable woman in the world. So that martyrdom served her in my eyes. Do you know what I mean? So because she wasn't parenting and owning a business and doing all the things at the same time as maybe we are in 2025.
Yes.
Even now, if she was to come out and say, you know, say, for example, I said I'd like to go and stay in a hotel by myself for the night. I wouldn't want to say that to her, because there would be judgment.
Yeah.
So I would need to get to a place, and this is why I'm really heartened with you saying this is a work in progress. It may never get to a time where she doesn't judge that, but that's okay, because it's me owning my story, as you say.
Yeah, you just have to be okay with it. And I think the thing is, we have to expect, when we're changing these imprints, we are going to have some pushback in certain areas of our lives.
Some resistance.
People, what it often does for a lot of people is that it mirrors back to them where they're not doing it. So especially when we have things like boundaries, when we take care of ourselves, you know, a person who also has great boundaries or takes care of themselves will probably high five you and go, amazing, good for you. you're going to be a better human when you do this. Whereas those who don't will often be the ones that judge and criticize. Now, again, that's not wrong. That's just their map of the world. And that
Mm,
usually is probably connected to keeping themselves safe and what they've
mm,
had to navigate. And the work is being able to, again, come home to yourself to be like,
mm,
well, what serves me?
mm,
And where do I want to stand in this place and in this world? And for
mm,
me, I think one of the biggest things where I've witnessed, particularly parents, make the change is when I ask the question, what do you want your kids' imprint around this to be? Like, what are you modeling to your kids? And then they go, oh, yeah. And I'm like, if you want your child to take a risk, if you want your child to be courageous, are you modeling that? If you want your child to have a healthy relationship with money, what are you talking about? You know, what are the words you're using? Like, I think changing it for our children is often one of the ways that parents will be brave enough to do it.
I completely agree. Because even your example before around the self-care in front of your daughter, that's
Mm.
something that, I have two daughters, and it feels safer to dip my toe in thinking that I could model for them so that their
Yes.
lives would be better when they're
Yeah.
women who are juggling all of the things,
Yeah.
rather than, but understanding also that you shouldn't need to just do it for somebody else,
No.
to model to somebody else.
Yeah.
But I am more comfortable with that as being,
Yeah.
maybe a safe first step. And so I understand why that has resonance
Yeah.
with the people that you work with.
Mm.
Why, Lael, your book gives really relatable examples, like things like screaming at our kids, or where we find it hard to be brave and speak up at work.
Mm.
Why do these behaviors that keep popping up, and they're seemingly small,
Mm.
why do they have such deep roots?
Yeah. Well, I think particularly around things, anything really to do with feelings, emotions, all that kind of stuff. I think the reason why that is often so hard to change is because it comes back to those deep core roots around attachment and
Mm-hmm.
survival.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when we really drill down, we come back to understanding that as little children, as babies, we need two things to survive. We need, food and shelter, which hopefully the adults in our lives give us. And the second thing is we need attachment, which means we need an adult to attune to us to take care of us.
Mm-hmm.
And what a lot of the research says is when we don't have that, we can actually die, right? We
Mm-hmm.
need touch, we need connection, we need attunement in order to survive. It's like a fundamental need of being a human.
Mm-hmm.
So, as little children, in the environments we grow up in, we learn pretty quickly around how we need to behave in order to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So, if we grow up in a family where feelings are not okay, it's not okay for you to cry, it's not okay for you to get angry. As a little child, you learn pretty quickly that when you do get upset or you get angry, that perhaps your adult in your life turns away from you. Maybe they put you in your room by yourself. Maybe they smack you. Maybe they yell at you. You learn pretty quickly that they are not okay with feelings. And so what we have to do in order to survive is we have to find a way to cope with that. So we either push them down and we learn to repress them, and we learn to disassociate whenever big feelings come up. Or if we can't contain them, we get really angry, and then it comes out in anger and aggression, and then we're often labeled as bad or naughty and all that kind of stuff. So that, in my experience, for most of the adults that I've worked with, was their imprint around feelings and emotions. And that, I think we have to remember when we zoom out, is a reflection of the time that we've grown up in. We've grown up in this behaviorism paradigm, which is all about, I reward you when you're good, I take something away from you when you're bad. And that has been the narrative for the last 60, 70, 80 years of raising children. Is it's all around, we must get kids to be compliant. A good child is a compliant child. They do exactly what we say. Yet we know now that being a compliant child often means that you negate your truth of how you feel around things. It often means you have to push your feelings down. It usually means that your boundaries aren't respected. It usually means that you often don't live your passions and truths, because it becomes all about, do the people around me approve of me? And so then what I see, particularly with the adults I work with, is we have had such a strong good girl or good boy imprint within us that we grow up to be adults that spend most of our time outsourcing our approval to everyone else. Am I pretty enough? Am I smart enough? Am I successful enough? Do you like me? Do you approve of me? And so we spend a lot of our time looking for the approval outside of ourselves, because the imprint has been, well, when we approve of you, you're good enough. Whereas the reality is actually that we are all born enough. I mean, the biggest kind of core wound that I see and I've worked with is this sense of enoughness. Am I enough? And the reality is we are all born enough. But unfortunately, our society and also sometimes the way we were raised tells us a different story, right? I mean, you think about things like education, the way that it's been set up, the way that it exists, it still, pits everyone against each other. That
Mm.
if you are very good at this style of learning and you get
Mm.
A's, then you are enough.
And you're
And if you
rewarded
don't,
for that.
yeah,
Mm.
if you don't learn in the way that, we tell you you should, then you get a D or an E, well, then you become not enough.
Mm.
So, I mean, this exists in our society everywhere, right?
Mm.
And I guess when we come back to how this operates in our daily lives, we can see that a lot of the imprints and the stories and the wounds are connected to those inner parts of us, that inner child that had a strong belief system that they were only lovable when they were good, and they're only worthy when people are approving of them.
Mm.
And so then, we grow up to be adults, and perhaps if our partner's upset, we might lose our center because we're like, oh God, I need them to be okay for me to be okay. Or if our
Mm.
child gets really angry, we can turn that into, well, if I was a good mother, then my kid wouldn't be
Mm.
angry. Or
Mm.
if our child's upset, we do everything in our power to stop it and shut it down because it feels too painful. It taps us
Mm.
back into our own feelings of not being enough. Or if we have a work colleague that we kind of clash heads with, we can have a whole other story, narrative around that. I mean, we bring stories to everything we do. And
Mm.
for me, I guess what I find is that when we can pause in those moments where we are having a reaction and kind of take a moment to go, well, what am I feeling and what does this remind me of? And the question I often use, and I use this in the book, is how old am I right now?
Mm.
Is it tapping us back into those younger parts of us that have that really strong imprint that says this is not okay?
Mm.
Because in an ideal world, and to give you the opposite of that, in an ideal world, we would raise children where we welcomed their anger and we
Mm.
welcome their tears and we welcome their frustrations. We would still absolutely have boundaries. We're going to help them when they feel angry and flooded to not hit their sister or, kick the dog. And we're there to guide them how to use and express their feelings in a healthy way. And in that, and what we see in that is the imprint becomes to children, all of me is welcome here. I'm
Mm.
allowed to be angry. We're not allowed to take that out on someone else, right? That
Mm.
is not okay. But anger is not bad. You can be
Mm.
angry, but we want to move that through your body in a healthy way.
Mm.
And it is so okay to cry. Crying is a
Mm.
beautiful thing. It's a normal part of being human.
Mm.
And when we cry, we know that the people around us will hold their arms out and say, hey, come here. I can
Mm.
hold you. I don't judge you for your
Mm.
tears. Your vulnerability is welcome. You cry, you let it out, you find your way back into your center
Mm.
and back into balance. Now, I guess what I've seen over the years of raising my own kids and then working with a lot of families is when we set up that imprint for our children, what happens is it develops emotional intelligence in children.
Mm.
And what happens is they then grow up to be adults that know when they have feelings, their first question is, what is going on for me here? And I need to be curious about this instead
Mm.
of projecting it onto someone else. You're making me angry. Or why don't you just behave this way? Then I'll be okay.
Mm.
They develop the emotional awareness to go, there's something going on for me here. What do I need to look at?
Mm.
What do I need to feel? Do I need to reach out for some support to process how I'm feeling? This is the development of the emotional intelligence, which ideally then allows interactions that we have with humans, because we're all going to interact with each other, to have so much more ease, and
Mm.
also where we stand in our own power because we're owning what is ours. We're owning that
Mm.
when we have a reaction with someone, it's our reaction, right?
Mm.
But our narrative in our culture has often been when a colleague does something to annoy you or your child won't behave, the thoughts are often, well, they're wrong and they just need to change in order to make me
Mm.
be okay.
Mm.
And I think that is where we stumble, because it is not about making someone else change to make you okay. It's about being curious as to, what are my reactions here? What is
Mm.
this bringing up in me, in this person? That is where we begin to own our stories. And that's actually where we become empowered, because,
Mm.
we're all just humans bumping into each other on this planet, right? And we all make it mean what we make it mean. And really, I think at the end of the day, when we have the ability to own what is present for us, acknowledge our feelings, then we get to communicate in a way that is so much more about respect, about mutual, goodness for both of us. It's an empowering way to actually live our lives. Yet most of us, nearly all of us, have not been modeled how to do that. And again,
Mm,
no shade to our parents, they were just doing the best they can.
mm,
But here we are at a time where we are learning more about this. We are taking more responsibility for our feelings and the way that we communicate within the world. And then we get to teach that to our children. And that's where we're going to see this planet shift.
mm. What a gift that is. I've got a beautiful colleague who, she's a friend and a colleague actually, and she teaches little children. And she's got a thing where she says, "Oh, crying means you care."
Yeah.
And she says that from her, early childhood students all the way up, like, "Oh, crying means you care." And I just think, my goodness, even a phrase like that,
Yeah.
if little children heard that all the way up and from home as well, that just means that's really important. Even if you cry in a meeting at work, that means you care,
Yes, absolutely.
rather than,
Yeah.
and I also think I really appreciated the question in your book about how old am I in this moment? And because, often that's really kind of, it really moves a sense of a memory there that, you unlock something. But I found myself reading that sometimes being a young professional, and some of the things around, so that's why I've asked you the question around not being brave enough to speak up in meetings would be an example.
Yeah.
That's not an imprint for me from being a child. That's being a very early employed professional, and the sort of leadership that, people who were at the other end of their career were modeling around young people having a voice, or what it meant to have enough credibility to be able to speak, and all of these sorts of things. So I just really want to make that point, and with gratitude around the age in which these imprints are not necessarily from birth to 7, like we would, and of course we know those are formative years, but just to sort of even take the pressure off as parents too, we can gain these imprints throughout our lives from lots and lots of different people that we would take leadership from, can't we?
Absolutely. And I love that you bring up that point. I mean, in writing that book, the imprint that surfaced the most for me was teenage me, because my whole thing around writing and being smart enough was so steeped in my teenage years of learning, and then in my early adolescence, in my early adulthood, really again about exactly as you're saying, being in those spaces with, older people who'd been around for a lot longer. Again, is my voice valid? What can I learn? And I think, one of the things that I really do stand for, especially when I work with leaders, is we have to make it safe enough for people to make mistakes, and we have to make it safe enough for young people to use their voices, because how else do they learn? I'm a big fan of doing the apprenticeship. I say this all the time. You want to learn something new, find someone who's done it before you and say, I want to learn everything from you. Like, really acknowledge their place. You've come first. You have this body of knowledge. I would love to soak up as much as I can. And when we're willing to be there and make mistakes and learn and be guided, my gosh, it's such a huge, huge difference in where we stand. And so, I love that you have brought that up, because there are so many different experiences in our lives, not just from childhood. And also there's things like trauma that also can pop up. We can have painful experiences where we speak up in a workplace and everyone laughs at us, and all of a sudden we have this like whole trauma story of like, it's not safe to speak up, and then that becomes a thing. And trauma can happen in all sorts of different places. And I think the beauty of it is to be able to just acknowledge that was there, that felt painful. What am I making it mean? Is it true? How do we keep working towards finding another place to be with it? And that always takes a lot of courage, but also I think the rewards always pay off when we're willing to lean in.
I agree. And I think that the most powerful question, I think, to keep asking, and you've said this a few times in the interview and it's prominent throughout the book, what story am I telling here? And the fact that it's a story is often, it's fiction, it's narrative, we can honor that it's come from somewhere, but it sort of detaches from being part of you, and it's, an invitation to look at it with more, as you say, curiosity, and, without, attaching to the judgment. But that takes work. It really does take work, and it's a practice to keep trying and keep practicing, for sure.
And I think what's beautiful to understand about that is that our mind and our body is always trying to keep us safe. So it makes sense why we have these stories, and the stories are going to be like, do not do that again. you
Mm.
could be laughed at, or don't do that again because, you might be rejected or whatever. And so we create these stories to go, yeah, see, there's enough evidence there that that is dangerous, because every single part of us is hardwired for safety. It's hardwired
Mm.
for protection.
Mm.
So I think when we can bring that to go, I'm not wrong for thinking those thoughts, and I'm not wrong for having that story. There's a part of me that says that's dangerous. Let's not do it again. But let's lean into that. Let's be curious about it. Let's
Mm.
hold it lovingly and compassionately. Let's not judge it. Let's
Mm.
just be like, yep, it makes sense why I feel scared about that, or it makes sense why I don't want to do that, because every part of me saying, you could get hurt again. And that's a clever protective part of our bodies. We're very smart in ways to keep ourselves safe.
Or, as you say, belonging is a real core need of ours. So, if you've ever been in a situation, I can recognize this in my own life where I'm part of a group of people who are talking about somebody else and
Yeah,
something that they've done, in a meeting or in a social situation. And then that might be a behavior that I then exhibit later. There's real danger there. There's real
yeah,
caution
yeah,
because I would not belong to that core group of people who may
yeah,
say similar things about me. So I really acknowledge that. And I think the gift of getting older is that you can work out that you can take some things from some people and leave other parts. And that is as true in your own family, in your partner, in your friends, in your, you know, as it is your colleagues or as it is your friends.
yeah,
So you don't need to accept and take on every single opinion and whatever of theirs.
yes,
And that's a lovely invitation to be able to teach children that, isn't
yes,
it?
yes,
Like, oh, that person's really great at that. I really resonate with the way they do that.
yeah,
But there's other things that they do that don't feel so comfortable for me, and that's okay because
yeah.
that's what they do, and I don't have to take. So this is a gift of getting older in the world and the curiosity around that.
Yeah, totally. I agree with you. Such wisdom there, Breeze, is so true. Is just like, what do I want this to look like, and what is
Mm,
mine here?
mm,
And I guess I think it comes back to remembering who you are again. Does that feel in alignment with who I want to be? No, it doesn't. And so,
mm,
where do I want to stand in that place?
mm,
And I think again, bringing it back to children, it's not just teaching it to children; it's modeling it to children.
mm,
I often say that kids are always watching. They're watching, they're taking on board, even, in our schooling systems, in our early learning, all the things. And
mm,
I guess ideally we want the adults to be modeling
mm,
this. But, I really hold this container that it's this generation of adults that are doing a lot of big inner work at the moment, where we're trying
mm,
to heal from our past and change it
mm,
for the future.
mm.
And it's messy. It's really
It's
messy, and
heavy.
we get it
Yeah.
wrong, and it's
Yeah.
clunky. Yet I often talk about when we start to look at life through this, I guess, level of consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
it's like we're learning a brand new language.
Mm,
And I often say that if we grew up in a family that just spoke English, right, learning to speak Italian feels tricky. And
mm,
so you practice it, you get it wrong, you make mistakes, but then you go hang out with other people that speak Italian, you get better at it. But the beautiful thing is if you keep practicing it, your kids become native in Italian, right? Because they're
What a
listening to
great
you all the time.
analogy. Mm,
And so then your kids grow up speaking Italian. And
mm,
this is, I guess, what I have found in raising my kids who are adults now and really doing this work. All the inner work that I have done and things that I've changed has only been of benefit to them. And I've still got stuff. We've always got
of
stuff, right?
course.
And my kids, of course, have got their own journeys, but their ability to speak Italian is far better than mine ever
Then
was
yours,
at that age.
yeah.
And
What
here's
a
the thing
helpful
what's
analogy.
yeah, here's the thing what's beautiful is it's innate for them,
Mm,
particularly around feelings, emotions, and what I love witnessing is all three of my kids work with children. So two of
mm,
them are disability support workers, so they work with a lot of kids that have autism or neurodiverse. One of my other kids works at my school, so she works with kids all day, being with their
mm,
feelings. Their ability to sit in the feelings with the kids is far better than often a lot of the other adults,
mm,
that are there, because there's an innate knowing in them that this is safe, this is okay.
mm,
It's
mm,
okay to be angry. Let's help you move your feelings. It's okay to be
mm,
sad. What can we do with it? How can I meet you
mm,
in that?
mm,
There's a knowing or a body resonance within them that comes from having experienced that. And I think that's where we have to be so compassionate
mm,
to ourselves as adults, because most of us have never had that experience of when we're really upset, being listened to lovingly, being not
mm,
judged, being
mm,
not fixed, but just being held in that.
mm, mm,
And so I think that, again, as we are brave and courageous enough to keep doing this work, then, we practice Italian and then it becomes something that is part passed to the next generation with a lot more ease, and
Mm,
hopefully that it just continues down the line.
Oh, and what a joy for you to see your kids now actioning, that Italian in the world. um, Lael, you are such a gift. I'm so excited to have met you, and you are every bit as insightful and warm and wonderful as I knew you would be. How can listeners, apart from Own Your Story, which I'd encourage, people to go out and purchase, I've got post-its all through mine on my bookshelf. How else can they connect with you and your excellent work?
Oh, thanks, Brie. Well, you can find me on social media at Lael Stone. Like, it's one benefit of having a weird name. There's not other Lael Stones out there. Or my website is laelstone.com.au, and I have lots of webinars, or I have courses where you can journey with me for 8 weeks. I have like an 8-month mentorship that I'll be running again next year, which is really for people who want to really dive deep into their own stuff professionally and personally. There's lots of different podcasts and books and all the things. So yeah, you can find all my work out there.
And I'd really encourage people to do it. So thank you for all of your knowledge and your generosity, Lael. I know the Habit Nerd community would have gained a huge amount, as have I. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of The Habit Nerd. I hope you found some new inspiration, learned something new, or gained a fresh perspective. If you did enjoy the episode, I would be really grateful if you could please leave a 5-star review, as it helps the show get in the ears of new listeners, plus it should only take you 5 seconds. If you're keen for more tips and insights, then head over to Instagram and follow Habit Nerd.